I've never really found myself getting attached to camera gear. Running this channel means cameras and lenses come and go, and I've never really struggled to let them go. However, the Canon R5 is an exception to this. This is the camera that ignited my love for photography, and it's been a reliable companion on my photography journey that has helped me capture some of the images that I am most proud of. But there are rumours circulating that we can expect a Mark II in a few months, and this is the first time I would really find it hard to even consider upgrading. So I figured it's about time to talk about my favourite camera. Talk about what upgrades the Mark II would have to bring to the table for me to say goodbye to the R5, and why I think the Mark II might just make the Canon R5 an even better buy. So it's been 3 years now using the hell out of my favourite camera, the Canon R5. So I figured it's about time that I made a dedicated video talking about just how good of a time I've had using this camera. I'm going to be showing loads of photos today with just as much Canon R5 footage dotted in between too. So let's get started. So the Canon R5 has been the absolute backbone of my portrait photography portfolio for years now, and is responsible for some of my favourite images I've ever taken. The Canon R5 delivers excellent skin tones for portraits too, and in general I just really love the colours coming out of the Canon R5. Sure, Canon have made some improvements to the colours with the newer R6 Mark II and the Canon R8, but still, to me the Canon R5 delivers really pleasing colours and skin tones with really minimal effort in post. Portraits are captured in stunning detail, which really lends itself to studio work, whether that be beauty or headshots, but you do have to be prepared for plenty of retouching, as that amount of megapixels means there's going to be a lot of skin detail captured, and these RF lenses are super sharp, so there's going to be a lot of work in post, but it is definitely worth it. Another great benefit of the Canon R5 is that there is absolutely no shortage of amazing portrait lenses on the Canon RF mount. Yes, they are expensive options, but investing in something like the 50mm 1.2 or the 85mm 1.2 can really make your work stand out. And in my opinion, Canon colours and skin tones really lend themselves to flattering wedding content. A personal favourite of mine in terms of the picture profiles in the Canon is definitely Faithful. It gives me the nicest skin tones in my opinion, and just a really nice look to wedding photos in particular. And if a venue or lighting situation calls for it too, then the Canon R5 is absolutely no slouch in low light. You can easily push the ISO beyond 10,000 and still get pretty good results. So don't let people tell you that high megapixel sensors like this don't perform well in low light, because although that might be the case for other cameras, I've always been really impressed with the low light results from the Canon R5. So one area I've really put the Canon R5 through its paces is for travel, as a hybrid camera for both photo and video and things like landscape photography. In my opinion, the Canon R5 is an amazing hybrid camera for travel. Here's some recent travel photos alongside some 4K footage I shot on the R5 at the same time. Switching between photo and video is so simple, I just leave the ND filter on and use the R5 for both. So one thing that Canon got right on the R5 right off the bat was the way that you can switch between photo and video mode. So on the R6 Mark II and the R8, there's a new switch on the left-hand side of the body where you can switch between photo and video mode, which is really good, but you do have to put that left hand onto the camera body to swap it. I much preferred the version on the R5, and again, I think Canon got it right the first time, where you combined this multi-function button here to swap between video and photo mode, and it's just so much quicker. You can swap with one hand just with a single press of a button, and it's instantaneous. So the R5 Mark II will probably have the same switch as the R6 Mark II and the R8, but I personally really prefer the way they did it the first time. The Canon R5 has amazing photodynamic range too. Just underexpose your images a little bit, and I've always found it effortless to capture all the details in a scene. You can crop pretty significantly before losing any detail, especially for things like social media use anyway. I found that the R5 manages to retain detail really well even under heavy crops. And in my opinion, the high megapixel count of the R5 is actually amazing for travel, because you can crop, for example, a 35mm prime lens to the equivalent of a 50mm lens in post and lose very little detail. meaning you can bring less lenses with you thanks to the ability to crop for reach. So today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you are looking to build your photography portfolio website, then you should definitely check out Squarespace. The thing I loved most about Squarespace is that you don't need any prior experience in website building or designing to create an amazing website thanks to its intuitive, fluid engine. Squarespace offers amazing looking and fully customizable galleries for you to showcase your work to potential clients. I use them on both my personal portfolio website as well as my wedding photography website. And if you have products to sell, whether that be physical or digital, well, Squarespace also offers all the tools you need to create an online store and shop front to start selling quickly and easily. So if you are ready to dive in and create your perfect website, then head on over to squarespace.com/James Reader to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code James Reader. So now let's look at how the Canon R5 fares in video. So I'm going to show you loads of examples of the Canon R5 in 4K 25p because that is where I use it the most. And to me, the R5 has probably the sharpest 4K of any camera I have used when in the 4K HQ or fine mode anyway. And again, just like in photo mode, you get amazing colors in video too, especially when using C-Log3, where I personally can just throw on one of the gamut conversion LUTs and be really happy with the results. And I'm generally really happy with the dynamic range from C-Log3 too. I just tend to expose to the right a little bit and I'm consistently happy with the results and find it really easy to retain details in the highlights and shadows, even in the trickiest of scenes. The R5 is so sharp whilst remaining organic in my opinion, a lot more than some other camera brands which are either over sharpened or too soft. The Canon R5 strikes a really good balance between the two and I've always been super pleased with the footage. The Canon R5 also has a bunch of codec options, especially against something like the R6 or the R6 Mark II. It has All-I, for example, or IPB or IPB Lite, and even a RAW mode. It also has a really excellent APS-C crop mode for added versatility and if you need a little bit of extra reach in video. One downside of the Canon R5 is definitely its 4K 50p. I compared this to say the R6 and the R6 Mark II in the past, and in 50p, the R5 definitely gives the worst image, and it is easily its weakest video mode, generally giving quite a soft and mushy image for some reason. Something Canon got right with the R5 though is that there is no crop in 50p. And for the time that the Canon R5 came out, that was actually a pretty rare thing for 10-bit 50p video to not be in an APS-C crop. For example, this was the first camera I ever owned that had uncropped 50p. But luckily the Canon R5 has really usable 120p super slow motion modes. Yes, the file sizes are huge, but the camera doesn't crop again and it gives a reasonably sharp image. This is not a frame rate I use all too often, but it is great to have. So the Canon R5 also shoots 8K, which is extremely detailed, but again, huge file sizes. Again, I don't use the 8K mode a whole lot, but it is actually more usable than ever now, thanks to the IPB Lite codecs that really reduce the file sizes. The improved record times of the R5 II means that 8K doesn't overheat nearly as much as it used to do, and the 8K is amazing for cropping in a 4K timeline in post. And now looking at low light in video, again, in my opinion, the Canon R5 is an exceptional performer. I've pushed the ISO way beyond 10K and always been really surprised by the results. High ISO isn't something I really rely on too often, but I've never found that the whole higher megapixel cameras are worse in low light thing to be true with the Canon R5. In my opinion, it is as good or better than my R6 or R6 Mark II in both photo and video. The Canon R5 got a lot of bad press when it was released for how quickly it would overheat, and in my opinion, rightfully so, because when I first bought this camera, some of the modes were really unusable, to be honest, for how quickly they would overheat. But at some point along the way in one of the firmware updates, Canon have all but fixed the overheating issues for me. Again, I can only speak from personal experience here in the UK with our temperatures, but my Canon R5 has not overheated in a long time. And I've even tested it in 8K mode, just leaving it recording, and I've been able to get over an hour of 8K footage without it overheating at all. The R5's autofocus is simply excellent, and I really think that Canon nailed the autofocus system right off the bat with the R5 and the R6. It reliably detects and tracks eyes and has rarely let me down, even in low light situations. The same goes for video too, where the autofocus is also really easy to use. I find that the newer Canon cameras may have made small upgrades to the autofocus performance, but have also complicated it to some degree. Canon R5 has my favourite autofocus system of all the recent Canon cameras, thanks to its reliability and simplicity. And in the firmware updates, Canon have also added a really effective animal eye autofocus mode and vehicle autofocus mode too. So as I said earlier, rumour has it there is an R5 Mark II in the works for some time early next year. So I figured I would do a kind of wish list for what I would want to see in the Mark II version of this amazing camera. And I've been so happy with the Canon R5, it's really hard to think of things that would genuinely make me feel that I had to upgrade. So I thought I would start with a few points that would be compelling enough in the R5 Mark II that might make me consider letting my R5 go in favour of the new Mark II. And the first one would be if they fix the dreaded Canon IBIS wobble. This is one of my biggest gripes with Canon cameras in video, is the annoying warping and wobbling and artifacting in the corners on wider angle lenses. I really want to see Canon address this and try and fix this. I personally would be happy with weaker IBIS if it means it gets rid of this. Now, reason number two that would really make me think about upgrading is if they introduce the color profile C-Log 2. I don't mind C-Log 3, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, these days there's no excuse not to give these higher end mirrorless cameras C-Log 2 anymore. So those are the only two big things really that would make me consider upgrading to the R5 Mark II, and if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think that we'll see either of them in the Mark II. So I figured I would run through a few other things that I hope for or predict that Canon will probably do with the R5 Mark II, which will be great, but probably not enough to make me consider upgrading. Number one is that they need to put a full-size HDMI slot on the R5 Mark II. Other cameras in this price bracket have it, and the R5 Mark II needs to also. Number two is they need to remove the record limits. They have already done this on the R6 Mark II, for example, so I have no doubt that we'll probably see those removed in the R5 Mark II. Number three is please give us sharper 4K 50p modes. I feel like more people use 50p than 120p. So I would like to see Canon give the 50p mode some love in the R5 Mark II. So the final thing that I think they'll probably do in the R5 Mark II is increase the megapixel count. Now personally, I kind of hope they don't, because to me 45 megapixels is more than enough, but I'm sure Canon probably feel that they do have to bump the megapixels a little bit. So I personally would be happy with a small jump to 50 megapixels, but to be honest, I probably feel that it will be closer to 60 megapixels. But this has all just been my opinion, so do you agree? Let me know down in the comments and let me know what you would want to see in the R5 Mark II. So to conclude, it's probably obvious by now just how much I love this camera. I have no doubt the Canon R5 Mark II is going to be a fantastic camera, but in my opinion, the best thing about a potential Mark II release is that it should drive down the prices of the Mark I R5, making it more accessible, price-wise at least, for more people. I just feel that whatever upgrades the R5 Mark II brings to the table, it doesn't change the fact that today, over 3 years since the R5's release, if you were to buy this camera, I genuinely feel that it will meet or probably surpass any of your needs for many years to come. So yeah, as we approach the close of 2023, the Canon R5 remains a really amazing future-proof camera for both photo and video that I would strongly suggest you consider picking up. So that rounds out the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the inevitable R5 versus R5 Mark II video I'm sure I'll be putting together in the next few months. So again, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.